So the Giants answered their quarterback puzzle. Russell Wilson signed a deal today. But there are still so many unanswered questions about the draft. What will the Giants do? What directions can they go in? Let's talk about it next on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. Hi again, everybody. Paul Dottino back with you on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. Obviously, a very big day in East Rutherford as veteran quarterback Russell Wilson arrived at the Giants. He got his physical taken care of and then signed his contract to be the Giants starting quarterback this season. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that he said. He already had a presser with the Giants media, and I'm sure you guys already took a look at that on Giants.com. We maybe have some comments about that, and certainly anything you want to say about it, especially if you didn't get in last night. We did a special 2.5 hour show because of the breaking news of Wilson agreeing to the Giants yesterday. We did 2.5 hours last night. We just kind of scrambled, got things together. If you missed that program, Max Starks, veteran offensive lineman who played for the Steelers and is their radio analyst, he got an up-close and personal look at Russell Wilson all season long last year, and he gave us about a good 20-minute in-depth interview about what Russell Wilson will bring and will not bring to the Giants this year. That's already up on the archive. We did that show live last night, about 15 minutes into the program. If you want to cue it up, you can find that interview with Max Starks. Now, coming up tonight, in just a couple of minutes, we're going to talk to Mark Johnson. He is the radio play-by-play voice of the Colorado Buffaloes. Now, why did I decide to bring him on tonight? There are still so many people out there who have this notion that if Cam Ward is going to the Tennessee Titans with the first pick overall in the draft, and even though the Cleveland Browns have the second pick, that somehow, some way, the Giants would think about Shedeur Sanders at number 3. I'm not one who believes that. But be that as it may, it's certainly a topic of conversation. So I thought I would have Mark on to talk about not only Shedeur Sanders and what the latest scoop is out in Colorado about his NFL prospects, but also about the Heisman Trophy winner, Travis Hunter, who, as you guys know, if you've been listening to this program at all over the last several months, Travis Hunter is the guy that I would pick at 3 as the best player available for the Giants, especially considering there are medical questions about Abdul Carter's foot, the edge rusher out of Penn State. And what do you know? Before we get a chance to talk to you guys, Mark Johnson joins us. He is the play-by-play voice of the Colorado Buffalo. Let me see if I can just get this thing squared away. And there he is. And Mark, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, Paul, it's good to be on with you.
Well, I guess, one of the things that people have been talking about since the Combine is that, all right, it looks like Cam Ward has kind of moved to the top of the quarterback charts, and he's probably going to be the number 1 guy. Now, I don't know if the people out at Colorado will agree with that, but it looks like Shedeur Sanders has fallen into the number 2 spot. From what you're hearing out there at this point, the opening question before we ask you about the player is, what is the NFL draft gossip that you are hearing out in Colorado about Sanders' potential location?
Paul, I'm sorry. I live up in the mountains. Did he just cut out a little bit there? I know you're asking me about, before we talk about the player, you're asking me something about Shedeur, person of Shedeur Sanders. Was that what I missed out on?
Well, I think the opening question is, what is the NFL gossip around Colorado about where his potential landing spots will be?
Well, we continue. It's a moving target, to be honest with you, Paul, because with him the other day, and I asked him what he'd been hearing, and he said, where you're getting mixed messages all over the place, and I think that's pretty common. I think we know that it's out the draft when we get to this point, is that you're going to hear some days that it's going to be Team A, and some days it's going to be Team B. But we've heard the same thing, that Cam Ward maybe moved ahead of Shedeur, and completely mixed. I'm biased in this whole thing, which is stunning to me because of what Shedeur done during the 4 years of his college career here at Colorado, that anybody wants to take a flyer on him. But I guess you do so at your own peril. And then, of course, we'll talk about the Heisman Trophy winner as well. But I think Colorado's got that maybe the two best players in the NFL draft, certainly the best overall player, and I think the best quarterback. But I'm biased in that regard.
I know we are breaking up just a little bit, so folks, please have some patience with us because we're very grateful to have Mark joining us on the program tonight, particularly the Cleveland Browns. Have you heard much attachment to Shedeur with the Browns since they own the second pick and are one slot ahead of the Giants?
I have heard a little bit about that. Yeah, there's been some rumblings out on this end. I do know that not only Shedeur has spent time with them, but Coach Prime has had some conversations with them as well. In fact, the last time I was with Prime, he said he had some in-depth conversation with Cleveland and felt good about what their vision was moving forward. And so certainly that has been part of the I think the storyline so far to the draft with Shedeur in Cleveland. Yes.
All right, Mark, so let's talk about Shedeur Sanders. We'll get to Travis Hunter in just a couple of minutes. If I said to you, Shedeur Sanders should be the number one quarterback picked in this draft, what would you say to back that up? And at the other side of the ledger, what would you say he needs to prove or improve on if someone were to disagree and say, no, we think that Cam Ward should be the top quarterback?
Well, I'll say this, and I've always believed that, yes, you have to have the physical abilities. We all understand that. You're talking about the number one quarterback taken. We're just going to assume that the guys in the discussion have got the arms, they've got the feet, they've got the physical attributes to be there, and that's why they're there. I've always thought the number one thing you can have is a great decision maker. And not only what you do on the football field, but off the football field. This is a guy, Paul, that has lived in the limelight his entire high school and college career. He's had as much attention on him as anybody, I think you could probably say, maybe in the history of college football, because of who his father is and what surrounding kind of that Sanders family. He's dealt with he's seen all of it. I've also always believed from a quarterback standpoint, you have to have a guy to lift. A lot of times in college football, we make the mistake of taking the guy who's been a great quarterback on the most talented team in America, and so he's had all the weapons. Rarely do some of those guys face a team where they don't have more talent than the opposition. Shedeur has had to make his teams great. Here at Colorado, yes, there's been some talent in the 2 years that he's been here, but it's not a great offensive line. I think you're well aware of the fact was sacked about 95 times over 2 seasons here. He had to make plays. He had to elevate a team. That was on his shoulders. He had that responsibility, and I think that's a rare quality when you look at quarterbacks in the National Football League. Are they able to do that, lift their entire team? Now, what does he need to work out? I know the number one criticism about Shedeur Sanders is he holds the ball too long. And I think that's a valid criticism. I think there's reason that people have said that. Part of the reason that my view doing every game that he played here in Colorado was that because of the issues with that offensive line, because there was no running game to go along with it, he kind of felt that he had to be Superman. A guy that everyone out there knows very, very well, Pat Shurmur, is the offensive coordinator for the Buffaloes. And Pat and I talk on a regular basis, a weekly basis. Pat Shurmur and I get together. Pat has always talked about Shedeur and said, man, he is one heroic son of a gun. And Pat's got a pretty good evaluation, I think, with as many years as he's been in the NFL. And so has he held the ball too long? Yes. Was there purpose in that or reasons for it? I think so. Now he's going to have to learn at the National Football League level just like anybody else does. But I think you're getting a very solid and total talent at quarterback in Shedeur Sanders.
How much do you believe having Deion Sanders as his dad and Pat Shurmur with extensive NFL experience have been there to groom him through his college career?
Well, I think the part with Pat Shermer being there has been obviously a very productive thing for Shador. Now, keep in mind, he's had 4 offensive coordinators in 4 years of college football. Pat was here in year number 1 in an ancillary role. He was not the offensive coordinator. And so he took over that position late in the season. Now, he went through a full season with Pat Shermer, obviously, as his quarterback this past year. So I think there's great, I think there's positive things that comes from that. Now, growing up as Deion Sanders' son, you're dealing with the Kardashian aspect of this family where there's always a camera on, there's always a microphone. He has dealt with that kind of expectation, that kind of attention, that kind of media spotlight, if you will, his entire career. So I don't know that he's going to go anywhere. And I know New York is the biggest market in the world, but I think he's about as well prepared for potentially going to New York as anybody could be, I think, possibly coming from his background of what he's dealt with his father.
Now, if he were, let's just say hypothetically, he were to land with the Giants, and I know Dion himself has actually mentioned New York as a good destination for his son. If he were to land here,
Sure.
the Giants just signed Russell Wilson to be the starter for the 2025 season, and even Jameis Winston has now been also brought in as a backup. So Sanders, in all likelihood, would be the number 3 and have to sit for a season. How well do you think he would adapt to that situation?
Well, he is a mature kid. I'll say that. And my dealings with him over his 2 seasons, he has not. He's kind of got a natural leadership quality, like a lot of quarterbacks do, but he hasn't been a guy that's ever been knee jerk. And I fully understands that there's a learning curve that you have to go through when you get to National Football League or whatever the upper league might be in your given sport. He understands that. Now, knowing the competitive side of him, he's going to want to battle those 2 guys. And obviously, I know a little bit about Russell Wilson being here and covering the Broncos as well. And so I know what he's getting into there. And Jameis Winston's obviously has had some success at different times in the NFL. So I think that's an interesting little scenario that they've got lined up should he end up with the Giants with those 3 coming in there. My guess would be at some point in the not too distant future, Shador would find a way to find himself on the field, though.
Now, I need to ask you this, Mark, because again, New York is New York. I mean, it's no secret it's the number 1 media market, and the glare of the spotlight can be incredibly bright. The dynamic of having Deion Sanders and having his son, being a player possibly in New York, I'm not going to lie to you. There are people out here in this area who are afraid of the hype machine, of the headline machine, and of the potential distractions that could cause. I'm not gonna ignore that. It is a real fear of some fans. What would you say to them, or what would you say to the Giants about having that type of situation in the family unit that could potentially light fires amongst the media?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there. Number one, if you're going to be a top 5 quarterback, you're going to come with a lot of hype to begin with. So that's just part and parcel to the position. Here's the other thing. Deion Sanders is still here in Boulder, Colorado, right? He's not going to be out there in New York. Now, by extension, you're going to see some of that Sanders family hype without question. But in this day and age, I think, maybe the Sanders family, maybe Shador's situation is extreme, but everybody comes now with not only agents, but marketing people and social media people and all the different things that we all deal with in athletics day and age. And so I wouldn't be terribly worried about that, because I do think, going back to what I said earlier, Paul, he's the guy that makes great decisions. I've never gotten a hint or a whiff of anything where he makes bad decisions away from the football field when he's out with the guys, those kind of things. He's not that kind of guy that is going to get himself in a lot of trouble. And so I wouldn't worry about that kind of hype. It comes with the Sanders family. There's a lot of marketing that goes around at all times. But I don't think it's a bad sort of, shall we say, attention that comes with them. It's more about the family business and about marketing and about endorsements and those kind of things. That's really where it's focused on. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that, I don't think.
When I met Shador Sanders at the combine, he was very confident, very assertive, made sure that everybody knew of the accomplishments that he had put forth on his resume. But I do have to ask you, Mark, the BYU game at the end of the season was a real rough spot for him. How did he deal
Yes.
with that situation? Because, sometimes when guys hit that rocky point in the road, it does become a little bit of a soft spot.
Well, we just cut out just a second there. Again, I apologize for that. I think you're asking about his confidence. I've heard people say, "Got the combine." There was an arrogance about him. I was on a show the other day. Somebody else called me to ask me about that, and I kind of chuckled. And I said, there's a very fine line between great confidence and arrogance. We've dealt with great athletes here in the Denver Boulder area. Peyton Manning, I dealt with him when he was with the Denver Broncos, and guys like that. Those guys always walk a very fine line between arrogance and confidence. And so I think if you're going to be a quarterback in the National Football League, you better have great belief in yourself and great understanding of who you are and what you're capable of. And so I've never been terribly worried about that kind of thing. Now, if it does become that kind where it goes beyond just your ability, where you present yourself like we've seen some athletes where you're kind of special and need to be treated in a certain way, and it becomes something that happens out within the community, that's a different thing. Shadour's not a guy. You said you talked to him. My guess is you probably found him, yes, to be confident. You probably found him very gracious at times, probably a
Yeah.
very good mannered young man, and so I want my quarterbacks to have a great deal of confidence, bordering on I think sometimes that bravado, if you will. And so Shadour's always had it. When I dealt with him, he's always been great. I've watched him in booster situations, in fan situations. Always find him to be very gracious in those kind of circumstances. But there's no doubt he believes he is the best quarterback in college football and should be the number one pick.
Okay, well, I'm going to counter something with you here, Mark, because if I'm the Giants at number
Sure.
3, I'm taking Travis Hunter, who just happens to be another guy who
Okay.
plays for Colorado. And, the one thing I heard at the combine is that there were people debating as to should he be more of a defensive back? Should he be more of a wide receiver? From your perspective, what you know about him, what you've seen of him, how do you think he would be best utilized when he gets to the NFL?
Well, I'll tell you this just to kind of set the table, Paul. The guy that I've been broadcasting with the last 9 years is Gary Barnett, the great college coach at Northwestern in Newark, Colorado. Gary said to me at one point last year, about 2/3 of the way through the season, we're doing the broadcast, and Gary says, "Okay, I'm going to say it." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "That's the finest football player I've ever seen on the college level." And there's a guy who's been coaching for 50 years and had that evaluation of Travis Hunter. Now, as for what position do I think, and I know Travis will tell you, you've heard it, he wants to play both ways. I think he's a natural corner. That's what I think his position is, where I think he'd have the greatest, impact in the National Football League. Can he play on the offensive side as a wide receiver? Undoubtedly. And I think probably in a lot of circumstances, he'd probably end up being maybe that slot guy where it'd be like number 3 in terms of the options, in which case he's not going to be playing heavy snaps over on that side of the ball. That would be my guess. And again, that's just my assessment of what I think his strength would be. He has been phenomenal and is one of the great athletes I have ever witnessed. And we've had some pretty good ones come through here at Colorado. Laviska Shenault a few years ago, of course, who's been a wonderful athlete in the National Football League. I was in your state at Syracuse a number of years ago and got to see, I was calling the Syracuse Orangemen when Carmelo Anthony, those guys. I've seen Melo and a number of NBA guys come through there. I've seen great athletes, but I've never seen one like what Travis Hunter is. This guy is so unique and so, I think, physically gifted. And then there's a professionalism about him. You're asking about Shedeur and what he's like. I tell you what, Travis Hunter is a 21-year-old body with about a 35-year-old mind. The guy's just a homebody, doesn't do anything, doesn't go out. He just hangs at home. You never worry about what he's doing when he's out on the football field. That cat right there is a special, special player. And whoever gets him is going to get a great one, I'll tell you that.
Mark, we only have a couple minutes left with you. And again, I appreciate your time. If you can isolate for me, and again, I'm telling you, I would take Travis Hunter at number 3, so you don't have to sell him to me. But if I asked you, what is his best trait as a corner and what is his best trait as a wide receiver, what would they be?
I'll say as a defensive back, he has a relentlessness about him. He doesn't, being here in Denver over the years, Patrick Surtain right now, and Champ Bailey, we've had some great ones. He's got that quality, Paul. Whatever that it is, that arrogance that he's gonna be able to cover anybody that he goes against. He's got great ball skills in that regard. And the other thing about him, Paul, I'll say that just kind of came to mind. The one thing I saw in the 2 years watching him, there's instinct about him that great corners have, where he's peeled off guys and had interceptions because he read everything in front of him. And so he not only has the physical tools, there's something going on up here that's a little bit unique as well that some of the great ones I've been around have. On the offensive side, I mentioned the ball skills. Man, that dude is a ball catching Jesse. I mean, you throw it up and let him go and get it. We know great receivers, they'll go and get it. And he's one of those guys that somehow finds a way to make the catch. You've all seen the highlights coming out of Colorado. There was that catch against North Dakota State. He was getting mugged and choked out and somehow still came to the ball in the end zone. And so he's got that ability on the offensive side. I think he's but I'm not going to sell him short on the offensive side. And if there's anybody that can do it, after what I've watched for 2 years that could possibly play both ways, this guy's about as great a chance of making it as anybody I've ever seen.
Has there been just one question that people have when they say, oh, he's going to make the jump to the NFL? There's one thing he's going to have to learn or he still hasn't done? Because from my perspective, I think he checks all the boxes.
Yeah. Well, I think if there's one thing that he has to learn, let's see. I think it's just the fact that every single night, there's never a night off. I think at this level, there were times he kind of was able to coast because of the physical dominance that he had over the guys that he was going against. I mean, there were times I kind of chuckled on the air a number of times. I thought he was playing with guys, to be honest with you. You can't do that in the National Football League, obviously. You're facing the greatest athletes in the world night in and night out. And so he's going to have that learning curve just like anybody else is. And anybody that, we've seen from this area that have gone to the NFL, they're great players, yes, but they need to learn the process of what it means to play at that level. He's going to have to learn that just like anybody else. That's not a great criticism. I think that's something that's universally, there for every player that's got to make that jump. And so because of his physical attributes, the instincts that I was talking about, and the way he approaches things, he's really, I think, both he and Shedeur here at Colorado really handled themselves and carried themselves like professionals here. The way they dealt with everything. They're both making enormous amounts of money, like a pro would anyway, but they've really handled themselves off the field and how they approach the game like professional athletes. And so I don't think it's going to be a huge transition for them, but they've got things they've got to learn, obviously.
And I did find him to be actually rather humble when I met him at the combine, to be honest with you.
Yeah. 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 He's an interesting guy. He doesn't like doing interviews for the most part. And so he does them. He was always very gracious, I think, and humble when we did them. But it wasn't his favorite thing to do. Now he likes doing his podcast. That he was kind of goofy on and had a good time with. But when it came to the official interviews, he enjoyed doing them. But I think he carried himself pretty well when he did.
Great stuff. Mark Johnson, the voice of the Colorado Buffaloes out there in the Great West. I appreciate it, my friend. Thank you so much. I love the cowboy hat, and have a great summer.
Well, thanks. Thank you. I appreciate it. You have a good summer as well.
Okay, we'll talk to you again. Thank you, Mark. So there you go. That is Mark Johnson, the radio voice of the Colorado Buffaloes, with the lowdown on not only Travis Hunter, but also Shedeur Sanders. For any of you out there who still think that the Giants might entertain Sanders at the number 3 pick, I'm very clear. I'm a Travis Hunter guy. The whole foot thing, again, Friday's the pro day for Penn State. And that's going to be pretty important because you'll then get more information about what's going on with Abdul Carter's foot. It would take a tremendous amount of confidence if I were an NFL GM from my medical staff for me to be able to swap out Travis Hunter and take Abdul Carter. I need to have a tremendous amount of confidence in that foot to be able to make the Carter selection. I don't see any box unchecked with Travis Hunter or any box of concern. And again, he can help you on both sides of the ball. You've heard from Mark, which is something I've said now for quite a while. I do see him first and primarily as a cornerback, but I do think he can help you in packages at wide receiver. So we appreciate the time that Mark was able to give us. I hope, folks, that gave you a little bit more of a information from the heartbeat of what's going on out there in Colorado for two guys who have certainly garnered a tremendous amount of publicity and headlines as far as this NFL draft is concerned. So we thought it best to try to bring him to you. And it just so happens that it's the day that Russell Wilson signs his deal with the Giants. But because we did basically a Russell Wilson special last night, I didn't want to cancel out on Mark. I thought it was a good idea to follow through. He had the time and was able to give us some information. All right, so let's go to some of the chats. And folks, as you always know, the link to the StreamYard is right there underneath our video. If you'd like to get in with a audio call or a video call, if you prefer not to do a chat. Big Blue, one of our regulars, says, looking forward to another great show. Nothing like back-to-back shows. I love what the Giants have done in free agency. Believes the signing of Wilson and Winston sets up for the draft as well. I agree with you, Big Blue. This was the biggest puzzle piece that the Giants had to fill. Obviously, the veteran quarterback. Now that that's done and it's out of the way, you look at the entire take of what the Giants did, and it's in the high teens, the numbers of players that they have either re-signed or added to their roster. Joe Schoen has been exceptionally busy during the course of free agency, and I don't think there's any doubt the Giants have taken steps in the right direction, and what they've done is allowed themselves to go into the draft without being hungry. They have spots they have to improve. There's no question. They still need to get some very good, young, talented players in the draft. No one's going to deny that at all. Okay, this is not a finished product. This is not a team right now that anybody is going to pick to even win the NFC East, never mind go any further than that. I'm not saying that now either. But what I am saying is, even with a daunting schedule that it appears the Giants are going to have to face this fall, it is clear that they are a much better football team than they were a month ago. That's obvious. How far that takes them in terms of their one-loss record, I don't think anybody could tell you that today. But there's still more work to be done, and we'll have to see. So yes, the draft is certainly another component, and that's why we had the voice of the Colorado Buffaloes come on our program tonight. All right, Gary Gaston says, hi, P-Dot. I just watched the Russell Wilson interview, and he gave off the vibes. I guess he meant the best vibes since Eli. There's no doubt that Russell Wilson is very well spoken. I mean, he's been around this league now for quite a few years. You talk about the number of Pro Bowl appearances, right? Number of times he's been to the playoffs. We're talking about basically a decade of excellence, including 2 Super Bowl appearances and a Lombardi trophy. He's done it in a place that is rabid about football in Seattle. And so he's been used to the glare of the media spotlight. You'll even remember when he worked out with the New York Yankees a few years ago because he loved baseball so much and he had baseball skills, and the Yankees allowed him to do some workouts with them. So he understands the spotlight. The New York City spotlight on him is not going to be daunting. It is not going to be an issue for Russell Wilson. There is no question. I mean, obviously his wife also is a big pop star. They're used to the whole headlines and snapping the pictures and taking the videos and being out and about. So, yes, he's very polished. He's very poised. He knows how to conduct himself. There's no question. one of the things that I liked about what he said, and, I kind of, as you guys know, I try to take real time notes whenever the Giants have a presser, and I put it up on my Twitter page at Giants WFAN, and I try to either quote or paraphrase what the guy is saying in real time. So you guys can kind of get the feel as if you're sitting in on the press conference, because the Giants usually put these pressers up on a tape delay. And sometimes people want to get the immediacy of finding out what is being said. So I always do that as a service to you guys. And I think, as I looked at it, some of the things he talked about, I really liked. There was the leadership stuff he talked about, lead by example, come in and work hard every day, work hard during the off season, make sure you do all the little things, because those are the things, the basic fundamentals are the kinds of things you have to get right if you are going to instill a winning attitude. And Lord knows, the Giants have done a lot of losing over the last decade. So it's critical that the guys in that locker room look at a fellow who has been to 2 Super Bowls, who has a Super Bowl ring, and can give them whatever guidance there is possible on how to conduct themselves and how to do their daily business. It's always helpful when somebody comes into the locker room and shows off the jewelry. It's a big deal. It means a lot to guys, especially younger players. And the Giants still have one of the younger rosters in the NFL as we sit here today. So I thought he was embracing that role, which I thought was very important. And then I thought the other thing that was kind of good was that he talked about watching video. He's already done it. Watched video of all of the catches that the Giants wide receivers made last year. And he talked about how he's going to do everything he can to make those guys better. And really, if you listen to the interview with Max Starks last night, he talked about how immediately Wilson is going to make that receiver room better. He does throw with a lot of accuracy. He does throw with a lot of anticipation. He puts the ball where the receivers want it, which then usually leads to yards after the catch and explosive plays. Not to mention, of course, his famous moon ball, which is the big 65-yard pass downfield that he usually drops into the bucket. He seemed extremely excited to work with Neighbors and Robinson, and he went out of his way to praise Jalen Hyatt, knowing that Hyatt's got great speed. Yes, he has been a big disappointment his first couple of years with the Giants. But it's clear that Wilson knows who Hyatt is, knows what his toolbox presents, and seems to believe that they've got the makings of a dynamic passing game between Slayton and Hyatt and Robinson and Neighbors. And who knows, maybe they'll wind up taking somebody else in the draft too. Aiden Fink says, good evening, Paul. Glad you're having a show 2 nights in a row. Well, thank you, Aiden. I asked you guys this last night when we did the emergency breaking news show on Russell Wilson, should we come back a second night or not? And I told you to, keep clicking on my Twitter page. And if there's going to be a program, I'll let you know. And I did post that earlier this afternoon. Yeah, we're going to come back. Wednesday's our regular night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. This is going to be an abbreviated show, though, Aiden. I don't want to disappoint you. I mean, we have 500 plus live look-in viewers right now, which in recent times we've had many, many, many more than that. But I understand. The big news was Russell Wilson yesterday, and I expected that show to draw a lot of eyes and ears, and indeed it did. And I commend all of you who jumped onto that show last night on short notice, because that show was a big success. And we're going to try to just do a little bit with you here tonight. Chris L. says, I still believe the Giants will try to trade up to 1. If they can't, they will take Sanders at 3 if he's available. Shane needs his QB of the future. Chris, I appreciate the opinion. There is no right or wrong answer, as you've heard me say numerous times. I would not do that. I don't believe there's any way the Titans are trading out. I think they are locked in, like the Patriots were last year at 3 when they took Drake May. I believe the Titans are absolutely locked in, and they are going to take Cam Ward. I don't know if the Browns will take Shedeur Sanders or not. You heard Colorado announcer Mark Johnson say during the interview a little while ago that there has been some contact with the Browns. Deion Sanders has actually had conversations with the people in Cleveland. And so apparently there is some serious interest there. I don't think the Giants, in my opinion, I would not take Shedeur Sanders if I'm the Giants at number 3. I'm taking Travis Hunter. I've said it a billion times, and I'll say it a billion more times by the time I get to the draft. I am certainly of the opinion, especially after they acquired Wilson and Winston, 2 experienced NFL quarterbacks, as 1 and 2 in the room. I say, if you're going to draft a quarterback, fine. I am not against the thought of drafting a quarterback, but it should be later on. If you really love Jackson Dart, try to make a trade and go up and get him in the bottom of the first round. See what the price is, see how far he's dropping. I think I would want to consider that if I was really sold on Dart. If I wasn't really sold, or he went too early to where I couldn't get into the bottom of the first round and snare him, or if I couldn't meet the price that people were asking for, no problem. I'm fine with that. I sit tight at the top of the second round. I will probably wind up taking the best defensive tackle who's on the board at that point, because it's going to be a rich player in terms of talent. It's so deep. The defensive tackle spot, the first 2 rounds, is full of like plug and play starters. And Lord knows right now, that is a spot that will meet value and need for the Giants perfectly. So Ty Williams is a guy who I'd be very excited to take at the top of the second round if he should make it there. And I do think that's a ballpark area for him. And I love his versatility, and I love his toolbox. I think he'd be an outstanding selection at that point for the Giants. And so if you do that, not only don't force the quarterback at 3, which I've told you, I would never do. I wouldn't force the quarterback in any other round either. If by the time you get to your picks in, let's say, the 3rd round, right? And by the way, let's just go over that for 1 second, okay? Because a lot of folks maybe still don't know exactly where the Giants' picks are, okay? Just to give you a quick refresher, they're number 3. They're the 2nd pick in the 2nd round, which is number 34. They're pick number 65, which is the 1st pick of the 3rd round. And I'm saying right there, if there is a quarterback who has a grade at the top of the 3rd round when you're picking at 65, could it be Shuck out of Louisville? Got a lot of good traits. Now, he's 25 years old. So he's older. He's more mature. He's had some injuries. I don't think that makes him injury prone. He's a prototype size. Got all the skills that you would want. Great personality. Good leadership skills. The big negative on him is that because of the injuries, he does not have an extensive amount of snaps as a starting quarterback in college. So even though he's 25 and he's coming out as a mature college quarterback, he doesn't have all of those snaps that have given him the commensurate experience that a guy of 25 should have coming into the NFL. But think about this. If the quarterback that the Giants take is going to be at 65, he's going to be the number 3. And he's going to be redshirted the whole season anyway. He won't play. He's going to be not a prospect, but a project, which means he gets to sit for a year and just learn and watch. So maybe Shuck actually is the best guy for the Giants to take at 65 if he's available, because he's got a lot of great pro traits, and he's going to need to sit and learn from the other guys in the quarterback room who have been in the league. You could see a lot of logic there for taking a guy like Shuck, perhaps, if his grade says he should be taken in the neighborhood of the 65th pick in the draft. Then the Giants pick at the bottom of the third round at number 99. And then they got one more really early pick, and that is the third pick of the fourth round, which is 105. So think about it. 4 picks in the top 100, 5 in the first 105. There's no reason why the Giants can't take a developmental quarterback in the third round, or even at the top of the fourth at pick 105. They could very easily do that. And if I were in the chair, that's probably the way that I would go. I certainly would not force a quarterback. If a guy, let's just use Shuck for an example. If Shuck is graded on their board at 120, well, you don't take him at 65. You don't force the pick. So if there are no quarterbacks even in the neighborhood of where the Giants are picking, unless you feel you want to package a couple of picks and move up to get somebody, okay, I could understand that. If you wanted to package 2 picks together to move up and get one, maybe you decided that you really wanted, I don't know. I would not take Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe is all about his legs. Very, very wild and inconsistent with his arm. He's all over the place. I would not take a Jalen Milroe. But if you wanted to take a Will Howard, I don't know. You know, do you sense that he's the type of guy who could be a good developmental quarterback? I don't know. Maybe you do. Maybe you think that Kyle McCord would be a good developmental quarterback. You know, he went from Ohio State to Syracuse, and lo and behold, you know, put himself into the draft conversation. Anyway, I'm sorry, Chris. We totally disagree on this premise, but that doesn't mean either one of us is right or wrong. Isaac Moore says cornerback with wide receiver sprinkle plays when talking about Travis Hunter. He also says Russell Wilson won the presser today. Big Blue says these interviews with out-of-towners are very insightful. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm trying, what we do on Big Blue Kickoff Live, I'm trying to do here as well. I don't want to bring the same voices on, but I want to go to the heart of the beast. It doesn't make a lot of sense to bring on guys who are not there and are not around these players every day. I mean, I'm not around the players every day. I can watch the tape. I can read the stories. Well, if I'm going to bring on somebody, I want to bring on somebody who has been around these players, who's from that city, who covers that team, who works with, or maybe works with that team, like Mark. Mark is the radio voice of Colorado. It just makes more sense. Those guys know a heck of a lot more than anybody who's reading something on a website, reading a draft guide, reading a newspaper, or even watching video. So that's my philosophy in getting the out-of-towners. But I am very, very specific on how I vet these guys. I only want the guys who can really provide some good stuff for you folks to digest. I'm not interested in somebody who's just going to pop off and create a headline or shoot off a crazy opinion. I want the guys who are really there getting their hands dirty in the pits. The Big Moo says, hi, Paul, checking in late. Hi, Big Moo. K. Saint says, I know you would draft Hunter at 3, but what's your gut feeling telling you who the Giants would draft if Hunter and Shador is at 3? I think the way the Giants set it up, K. Saint, with Winston and with Wilson, the way they've set it up, it makes the most sense by all the logic that I see is not to take Shedeur Sanders. It seems obvious to me, based on what they've set up, that Travis Hunter would be the pick. That's how I happen to feel, but I also see the logic in it. And I think that this is one of the reasons why the Giants so badly wanted to get themselves a veteran quarterback. Getting Russell Wilson in here was critical to the Giants being able to win some games this year. I mean, you look at Travis Hunter, he is truly a superstar just waiting to be unwrapped. Are you honestly going to say to me that this Giants team doesn't need a headache player, a superstar player like Travis Hunter? Especially with the way the passing game is in today's NFL. And we know that Tay Banks needs to be pushed, right? He had a very inconsistent season last year. So you draft Travis Hunter, he probably makes Tay Banks better. And if he doesn't make Tay Banks better, maybe he just flat out immediately beats him out and you've got a starting corner. That doesn't even talk about the fact that Hunter could help you with packages on offense. And when you put him out there in a 4-wide set with Robinson, Slayton, and Neighbors, man, you're looking at some potential for big, big plays, especially knowing how Wilson loves to get the ball downfield. There's an awful lot to be said about that. Hunter can immediately help the Giants climb up a couple of steps on the road to respectability. It's just to me, it's so obvious that, I get it. Everybody's entitled to an opinion. But I think when the equation is 2 plus 2, 4 is the only answer you really should be able to come up with. And yet there are some people who just want to keep insisting and forcing a square peg into a circular hole. The Big Moo says the Giants are not taking Sanders after their recent moves. No way. Big Moo, just add up the equation. That's the way it looks. They're not going to do that. Russell Wilson, according to Aiden Fink, needs 17 passing TDs to pass Eli Manning for 11th in all-time touchdowns. Okay, I had not looked up that stat, but now that Wilson's here, I'm sure there are a whole bunch of stats we're going to have to start looking up because he has had a Hall of Fame career. Aiden Fink says, thanks for the updates earlier. I was on Twitter when you were tweeting the stuff out during the presser. Well, you're very, very welcome. Again, I am at Giants WFAN as part of the official Giants broadcast team on the Giants WFAN radio network. Big Blue says, Paul, will Bryce Ford Wheaton have a roster spot this season? I certainly hope so. He proved last year to be one of their most effective coverage guys on special teams. What I'm kind of hoping is that he gets a little bit more of an opportunity to work his way into the receiving situation. I thought 2 years ago when he got hurt during camp, I thought he was really making a very strong bid, to be a guy who was going to get some footballs thrown his way as a receiver. And the Giants thought so much of him. They thought he had made such a strong push. They said to him, hey, do you want to try special teams too? Because we think you're doing an awful lot as a receiver. If you can show us dual value by playing special teams, that's really going to help your cause to make the 53. And that's what he did. It's exactly what he did. And so that's why even after he had the ACL injury, they kept him around. And what did they do last year? He proved them right. He was one of their better special teams coverage guys. Now, again, he's a year removed from the injury. I wonder how much can he inject himself into the receiving rotation. It would be great if he can, because we all know about the speed that he had in college. And at 6'4", he's one of those skyscrapers that I always believe need to be as a part of the wide receiver mix in that room. Aiden Fink says, I'm not disappointed by an abbreviated show. Thank you for doing tonight too. Well, thank you, Aiden. That's awfully kind of you, because I don't know if my voice has enough to do another 2.5 hour program tonight. Leave the Race says, didn't you also not want Eli? You wanted that O-line who busted. Get the quarterback, let Banks be CB2. Well, they've already got Paulson Adebo. They signed Paulson Adebo to a big fat contract from the New Orleans Saints. And Adebo is like a CB1A. Get another wide receiver next year if you really want it. It's not a force. Quarterback is most important. Shador has it. Okay. The year that the Giants took Eli Manning, I was in favor of Ben Roethlisberger. Okay? There were people in the Giants organization. Some wanted Eli, some wanted Phillip Rivers, some wanted Ben Roethlisberger. What you're talking about was prior. Originally, I wanted to take Robert Gallery. Robert Gallery was the offensive lineman who went to the Raiders and wound up just having kind of a mediocre career. Gallery was the guy who I thought they should have taken to build their offensive line. But I said if they're going to take a quarterback, I would take Ben Roethlisberger. Now, as it turned out, Big Ben and Eli are both going to wind up in the Hall of Fame, and Phillip Rivers very well might too. I don't see any reason why that couldn't happen. But I think all three quarterbacks went in the spots that they should have gone. As I recall, and let me go back to that 2004 NFL draft for just a second. And let me see something here, because it's been a while now. Yeah, Gallery was taken second by the Raiders. And Gallery was the guy who I thought the Giants needed to take because I was of the opinion that they should keep Kerry Collins. He was the Giants starter for 4.5 seasons, had 2 playoff runs, and 1 NFC championship, taking them to the Super Bowl when they lost to the Baltimore Ravens in Super Bowl 35. I thought Kerry Collins was a very good quarterback for the Giants, underrated, and thought that he could very easily get them into contention again had they kept him. But I wanted to see that offensive line fixed. And as you know, I've been screaming about offensive line for many, many, many years. And for many years, I got a lot of guff from people either on the internet, people on the Big Blue Kickoff Live show, even fellow media. Oh, what are you taking offensive line for? You got to take a receiver. You got to take a running back. You got to take a pass rusher. People continued for years and years and years and years of neglecting the offensive line. And so, it was no surprise to me that over the course of time, the offensive line deteriorated and the Giants found themselves in huge trouble. And it was only after years and years of deterioration of the offensive line that the rest of the media finally caught on and said, oh, light bulb just went on. Got to get more offensive line help. And now it's become a recurring theme every single season. Nice of everybody to jump on board the train long after it had already pulled out of the station. So yes, absolutely leave the race. I was all over Robert Gallery, and I thought Big Ben was the top quarterback in that draft. But I'm not disappointed the way it turned out. Obviously, no question about that. BPA, rest of the draft says leave the race. Easiest way to draft. Don't send draft capital to get Dart. I personally, I think if they really needed a QB, again, if they decided they were going to wait till the late first round or early second, I do like Dart's traits. He is inconsistent. He has had a lot of mechanical issues. But I do think he has a lot of skills, and I like his makeup. So if they found that the price was right to make a move for him, I could absolutely see the logic in doing so. I'm thinking more and more as we get closer to the draft, I would see if I could get Shuck out of Louisville in the third round. That's probably how I'm starting to feel right now. The problem is at the combine, football people, I'm not talking about draft gurus, I'm talking about football people, former players, former coaches, former administrators that I talked to at the combine. They all fell in love with Shuck's traits too. And if you listen to those folks, Shuck might not even be there at the top of the third round. Now, the common guy on the street was probably reading draft gurus that said maybe he's a fifth rounder going into the combine. But after talking to a lot of football people, NFL teams are not sleeping on him. He's got really good traits. And if you want a project quarterback, he might be the best late second day. Again, I don't know exactly where he's going to fall, but he might be the best second day project quarterback in this draft. But again, leave the race. I'm with you in that if the Giants don't see a quarterback fall into their spots and they don't feel strong enough about making a move to get one, then don't take one. Just go best player available through the whole draft and deal with the young franchise quarterback next year. Mikey C says, can't wait to hear what Russell will have to say about mentoring Milton. Will Howard might fall to the third. Oh, I don't think there's much doubt about that. I think Howard's probably going to be even a little later than that. I don't think he's as good a prospect as Shuck in terms of pure skill set. Now, what Will Howard did during the college football playoffs was really sweet. That was a really nice run. But for those of you who like Will Howard, that was the best of Will Howard. I don't know that we saw enough of that out of him over the course of time to say that, he's going to be a third rounder. Rose Tap 87, 180 pounds on Travis Hunter doesn't get you nervous. He's not a running back. Okay? He's not a running back. So no, I think he's going to mature physically, mentally, etc., etc. I was just looking. Let me see if I can find his combine number. I know ESPN is listing him at 185. I'm not sure what his combine number was. You know what? I've got that packet in the other room. No, Rose Tap. The talent is just screaming off the page. I'm not really concerned about, and his work ethic is insane. I'm not really concerned about his actual weight. Oh, wow. Big Blue. Holy smokes. Look at this, folks. Big Blue. Wow. That is awfully generous. Thank you, Big Blue. Coming with a super user donation to the program, and that's awfully kind of you. Thank you so much, Big Blue. Certainly do appreciate it. I'm sorry I didn't get to you a little bit earlier. Leave the Race says, developmental should be young and raw and a high ceiling. No one after Shador really has that. All I'm going to say, Leave the Race, is that I know people who don't think Sanders should be graded in the top 40 players of this draft. Okay? There's quite a spectrum, a wide spectrum, as to his skill set and how it's going to translate to the NFL. There's one particular gentleman who's a retired NFL scout who, if you find him online, and I'm not going to give any free publicity to somebody, he's come flat out and said he would not draft Sanders, period. Now, I think that's really making quite a bold statement, and that's not my statement. But I'm not taking him at 3. Mikey C says, Howard and Tyler both have chances to develop. Still think Milton better, both, and Dart. X-Man0071 says the Giants should draft Carter at the 3rd spot, a DT in the 2nd, and then a quarterback. X-Man0071, I don't have a problem with that. I've said all along that, Hunter or Carter. That's really close. Again, get me the medicals on Carter. Make sure you get the green light from your training staff before you take him. But you get that green light, you can't go wrong taking Abdul Carter. Just like you can't go wrong taking Travis Hunter. I would not even sneeze at that pick. Taking a DT at the top of the second round, you and I are thinking simpatico. We're on the same page. I think the need and the value is going to meet beautifully at the top of the second round there. And then you got quarterback in the third round. Again, my friend, I think there's a good need and value component for that spot. I'm going to go just a little bit longer. I've been busted by some of my friends who said, "Oh, you're going to an hour? There's no way you can only do an hour of talking Giants football." Because I talk Giants football 26 hours out of the day, not just 24 or 25, but 26. And they were like, "You can't just do an hour on Wednesday night. There's no way that's going to happen." So let me do this. I'm just going to finish up our chats. I don't have any video calls. I don't have any audio calls. Okay? And then we'll call it a night tonight because this is really kind of a bonus show if you consider the Russell Wilson special that we had last night. Big Blue says, exactly, Hunter to push Banks. It's a win-win if you take Hunter because you're going to get value out of him as a rookie anyway, one way or the other. He's either going to push Banks and make him a whole lot better. We know that secondaries very rarely get through a whole season without injuries anyway. So chances are Hunter is going to play some in the secondary as a rookie. And then we also know he provides that wide receiver component where he could be in the 4 wide packages. So you're going to get some immediate impact out of Travis Hunter when you take him at 3. And that aligns with Joe Schoen, the general manager, who says his philosophy this year is to try to win as many games as the Giants can, which is why he went and signed a veteran, proven quarterback like Russell Wilson. It's also why he signed Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston was on a lower tier. He signed him strictly to be a number 2. Now, why did he do that? Because Joe Schoen understands, like a lot of general managers in this league, that if you don't protect yourself with an experienced NFL quarterback who at least has a clue as to what he's doing, you're asking for trouble. You're whistling past the graveyard. You just don't know if your number 1 is going to get hurt or he's going to have to miss some time, even if it's not a serious injury and it's a minor one. When you go into the season these days with a backup quarterback who doesn't have the requisite NFL experience, where he has shown he can actually go into a game and win, or at least be very competitive, when you do that, you leave yourself naked. And because Joe Schoen has a mission to want to win as many games as possible this year, they went and they got a guy, high risk, high reward in Jameis Winston. In a perfect world, he never has to play. Russell Wilson plays all 17. But if you need, in a situation, to have to call on your number 2, at least this is a guy who's had 10 years of experience. He's read NFL playbooks. He's read NFL defenses. He has controlled a huddle. And he has made throws in this league that have won games. So it's all out there. The breadcrumbs are all over the table. The Giants have shown you by the moves they've made what their general philosophy is and what it is that they want out of this 2025 season. They want as much production as they can and taking out as much insurance as they can that they're going to get back to being competitive and respectable this year. Mikey C says, I'm a big fan of Hunter and Carter, but Mason Graham is the best fit. It'd be super sexy next up the middle. Mikey C, I know. I'm a huge Mason Graham fan. Before the combine, I had even made comments that I'd love to get Mason Graham at 3. But I've kind of moved off of that because I just realize, as terrific as he is, Hunter and Carter are the 2 best talents in this draft. You can't pass up those 2 guys if you're picking number 3. You cannot do it unless they're both taken. Now, if Hunter and Carter are taken 1 and 2, sign me up for Mason Graham. I don't have a problem with that. Mikey C says, who is the sleeper at to start at guard? Neal or Rizzuto? Also see Chapman heavy in the rotation. I would think that as most of us believe, they're going to cross-train Evan Neal at guard this year. So let them all fight it out. Stinney, Van Roten, Neal, Rizzuto, Kubas. Let them all fight it out. May the best guy win. And it wouldn't shock me if they draft an interior offensive lineman at some point in the draft either. A guy who's got terrific traits, may not have had great production, may have even been at a lower level, at the FCS level, but a guy who's got really good traits to let Carmen Brasillo do his magic. I really believe in this offensive line coach. Let him work with a young fella and see if that guy can possibly push somebody and get into a competition to be one of the 5. Leave the Race says you can do both, get the quarterback and get the O-line as well. Big Blue says, love football people versus draft gurus. Yeah, tell me about it. Oh, you know what? I didn't do that right. I wrote Big Blue awfully generally. No. Big Blue awfully generous. There we go. Got it right this time. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Oh, Big Blue says now he's got another one here. Good night, Paul. Well, good night to you, my friend. What's the chances of back-to-back shows? No, Big Blue. Nope. We're not doing this show 3 nights in a row. Isaac Moore says, if Russell Wilson is a good fit and exceeds expectations, do you think he gets extended? Anything is possible. I don't think that's the plan right now, but anything is possible. Leave the Race says they also signed Russell Wilson because they didn't want to go into the season with Jameis Winston, only if they missed out on Shador. That's how I see it. Again, you're entitled to your opinion, my friend. Absolutely. Have the opinion. I don't share that opinion. I don't think most people do, but you're entitled to have it. And that's it. That's all we got. We are done with our chats. We have not gotten any video calls. We have not gotten any audio calls. And so, folks, that's going to do it for tonight's edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live. We thank you for joining us this evening. Again, we are usually here every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We try to do at least 90 minutes a show. That's what we try to do. But again, with the breaking news yesterday of Russell Wilson, we did a 2.5-hour show. We invite you to go back to the archive. 15 minutes in from the beginning of the show, Max Starks, former Steelers offensive lineman and current radio analyst, gave us a 20-minute detailed interview all about Russell Wilson. And you're not going to find anybody who knows more about this quarterback than Max Starks. He played the game, and he gave us a sensational breakdown, positives and negatives, about what Wilson will bring to the Giants. Again, we invite you to go back to the archive on the New York Giants on SI YouTube page and media network and replay at least that part of the show. Take the time to replay that 20-minute part. It'll be well worth the experience to give you information about Russell Wilson. So that's it. We thank Mark Johnson, the radio voice of the football Colorado Buffaloes, who joined us earlier in the program, about 5 or 10 minutes in. If you're joining us late, you can go back on the archive of this show and get his take on Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter, two very high profile prospects in this year's NFL draft. Folks, we will be back next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, for another edition of the Big Blue Kickoff Live. I have already procured a guest. It will be draft related, and it will be someone who's going to talk about one of the very high profile picks that we expect to see somewhere in the top 5 of the NFL draft. I can promise you that. But you're going to have to stay tuned and take a look at the Giants on at WFAN, at Giants WFAN Twitter page on Wednesday when I reveal who is going to be our very special guest next week. Until then, everybody, stay well. I'm Paul Dottino, and we will see you next time on the Big Blue Breakdown live right here on the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us once again, everybody. We'll see you then.